In the race for U.S. Senate, polls show Colin Allred closing in on Ted Cruz.
I see little chance of, one candidate or the other breaking away here. I think if anything, it's only going to narrow further.
We dig deeper into the numbers and the campaign cash flooding into this race.
We always say we're going to be as blue as a Texas sky.
The race for president draws crowds to events in Texas, but see why campaigns are not necessarily trying to win votes. Fentanyl is killing thousands of Texans, but new laws may be making a difference. We look at the work underway now to save lives. And Texas leaders sound the alarm and call on the state to do more to avoid a water crisis.
Well, we need to bring this front and center because Texas is out of water.
The needs and the response as demand for water keeps going up.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. It is the race to watch in Texas. Democrat Colin Allred is trying to defeat incumbent Republican Senator Ted Cruz. New polling suggests he has a chance. Emerson College and The Hill asked 950 likely Texas voters who they'd choose in the race for Senate. The results show Cruz ahead 49 to 45%. That is within the poll's margin of error. The poll also asked how likely voters feel about each candidate. Take a look at this graphic. Purple is good. It shows the percentage of voters who have a favorable view of each candidate. Dark purple is very favorable. Lighter purple is somewhat favorable. 48% like Ted Cruz. Allred is close behind with 45%. Now, red is bad. That's the percentage of voters who have an unfavorable view of each candidate. And you can see 51% of voters do not like Ted Cruz. Allred's negative numbers come in at 41%. But look at this gray bar here. It is important because that's the percentage of likely voters who have not heard of the candidate. And that's just 2% for Cruz, but 15% for Allred. That means a lot of undecided voters have not made up their mind about the Democrat. We asked the director of the poll about the numbers.
Cruz is a known commodity in Texas, obviously, whereas 15% say they aren't too familiar with Colin Allred. So there is some room there for Allred to, grow his name ID, grow his favorability, and perhaps catch up to Cruz. But independents are already breaking for Allred with 52%. I think there's probably some room for Cruz there, especially those independents who say that they're going to support Trump, but either haven't made a decision or are maybe leaning towards Allred. So I see little chance of, one candidate or the other breaking away here. I think if anything, it's only going to narrow further.
The poll also asked about the race for the White House, and no surprise, Donald Trump still has the advantage over Kamala Harris here in Texas. The poll from Emerson College and The Hill finds Trump leading Harris 51 to 46%. That is a 1% gain for Trump from a poll earlier this month. For context, Trump had the same 5-point margin when he beat Joe Biden in Texas back in 2020. Even with the poll numbers within the margin of error, neither presidential campaign is making an earnest effort to win Texas, at least not our votes. But as Ryan Chandler shows us, the campaigns are hoping our dollars will be making a difference in this crucial campaign.
We're just excited here in Bexar County. We're going to make sure that Bexar County turns out. We always say we're going to be as blue as a Texas sky, and that's what we're going to do here in Texas.
Blue skies on a red-hot day.
Anybody need any water?
Bexar County Dems lining up hours early for a star-studded lineup, hoping to boost local races and bring in the cash.
Just to have Doug here with us is hoping to help the down ballot. We're working really hard to get our president, and we know it'll be Madam President, all the way down to the bottom.
After San Antonio, Emhoff headed to Austin, then Houston. His visits right on the tail of J.D. Vance, who raised over $1 million last Sunday in Austin, the first of 4 high-dollar events to tap into the Texas well.
Texas is used to being an ATM for both parties in presidential election years.
The chair of the Travis County Republican Party was there.
And everyone was quite impressed with how sharp he was, the command he has of substance and policy, his clarity.
All in all, the FEC reports Texas donors have given more than $23 million to Donald Trump and more than $15 million to Kamala Harris. But Texas may soon be on the map itself, with more competitive statewide races How long until the money starts coming in?
It will remain donor state until it becomes a truly purple state, which it isn't yet, but demographically that could happen in the next 10 years.
Ryan joins us now. Since you first covered this story, there have been a few updates, but a lot of buzz about the Texas Senate race lately.
Yeah, that's right. The mood inside the Allred campaign is that they have momentum and they want to capitalize on it. Seems like we get a poll or two every week on this race. It's all anybody's talking about, not just in Texas, but nationwide. And the polls are really in agreement, not so much about the specific numbers, but they all show a very tight race. Most of them are within the margin of error, many giving Senator Cruz a 3 to 5 point advantage. But we did see one poll from Morning Consult of likely voters this week that shows Allred's actually up by 1 point, which is an outlier to be sure. Cruz is still the favorite, but that just shows how close this race is going to be. So all that polling has led major polling aggregators and analysts to shift the rating of this race. People like Real Clear Politics and Inside Elections had Texas as a likely Republican race for the Senate. That is shifting to now just leaning Republican. So that's giving more energy, more momentum to Allred and forcing Cruz to really think about being defensive here.
Well, the buzz is attracting some national campaign cash to Texas as well, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We learned this week that the DSCC, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, that's the arm of the party whose only job is to elect Democrats to the Senate, they announced that they're making another multi-million-dollar investment into Texas and Florida, focusing on Allred's race. That adds to another $79 million in ad reservations that they already had so far. So they say that they are expanding the map and they're going on offense in places that are typically thought as reliably red, like Texas. So that's significant. You have the DNC also announcing they're adding another $75,000 for Allred's race, as well as for Vicente Gonzalez and Michelle Vallejo down in South Texas. So Democrats smell blood in the water and they're swarming.
Well, I got to ask, how is the Cruz campaign reacting to all of this?
Well, Cruz is not taking anything for granted. He is campaigning very hard, trying to raise money. Every time you see Cruz on a national TV hit, he will tell Republican viewers that he's in trouble and he needs their help. I talked to the chair of the Travis County Republican Party this week. And he said candidly that Republicans are antsy. They know that they're confident in Texas Republicans, but they can't take anything for granted anymore, and they're treating this as a real battle.
Well, if you want to see the effect of the campaign cash, we have a commercial break coming up. Stay tuned. Ryan Chandler, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A new law boosts efforts to teach young Texans about the deadly threat of fentanyl. We speak to the mom who pushed for that law about the work happening now to save lives. Texas is running out of water, the warning from state leaders, and the call for action at the Capitol to meet the rising demand. Fentanyl poisonings are killing thousands of people across Texas, but there is some encouraging news. The latest statistics from the CDC show a slight drop in the number of deaths. DEA officials say some of the decline is due to increased awareness. Last year, Texas lawmakers boosted education efforts in the state, and Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill known as Tucker's Law. It requires school districts to educate students about fentanyl. It's named after Tucker Rowe, who died from fentanyl poisoning at the age of 19. His mom, Stephanie, helped push for the legislation. Joining us now, Stephanie Rowe. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So for people not familiar with your story, tell us a little bit about Tucker and Texans Against Fentanyl.
Yeah, Tucker was my firstborn, my only son. He was born with just an adventurous little spirit, a lover of people, and just a real light in our family and in others. And Texas Against Fentanyl is a 501c3 founded to fight fentanyl education, awareness, support, recovery, and legislation. In 2021, when I lost Tucker, I had no knowledge of illicit fentanyl. I had never heard of pressed pills. I did not know that teens were selling to teens, and 7 out of 10 pills were lethal. And as a mom, that just struck me that I didn't have information to I didn't have the information to safeguard my son and give him knowledge of that poison.
You pushed to pass Tucker's Law. What does it do?
Tucker's Law requires fentanyl education in grades 6 through 12. And when we passed this law, we thought, and the why behind it is I just wanted to share with schools that there's this poison that kids have access to, let's talk about it, and we were met with resistance. So we continued to escalate it, and when we got to the Capitol and we were fighting there, we thought, oh good, now the state will have this information, but it was really an unfunded mandate for schools, and they didn't know what to teach. What do we do now? Now they're just saying, hey, you have to talk about fentanyl, and it really kind of created a little bit of confusion, and that wasn't our intent in passing the law. So since then, now we have curriculum that we have developed, and we're in a pilot with the TEA on that.
Yeah, it has been a year since the law passed, and you kind of mentioned some of those challenges. What kind of difference have you seen it make so far?
Well, we do have schools reach out all the time, and we do assemblies, and we bring in the Tucker Project into schools across the nation. It's written to the state standards, so it's easily implemented. But really, knowledge is power. If a student understands that this is what it looks like, you can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, it can be added to these things, this is the impact it has on the body. It's not a just say no campaign, it's get educated so you can make better decisions. Tucker would have never tried heroin, but we know fentanyl to be 50 times stronger than heroin. And that's a knowledge. It was marketed and sold in the form of a pill.
The next legislative session obviously is looming in January.
Yes.
Will you be working on any kind of updates?
Yes, absolutely. We have some line items that we'd like to come back in and work on a little bit with Tucker's Law, and then we're also working on other legislation. It's important right now when people show up to hospitals, they're often not tested for that next level panel, and a lot of these deaths are not being accurately reported. So that's a big one for us. And then of course we are getting behind the fentanyl test strips. We really want that to pass this session. We were disappointed last session that did not get passed. And we're working on several others as well. We will not stop. We are relentless. We have a group, a network of angel families who have lost loved ones to fentanyl across the whole entire state. And we're going to keep pushing this to the lawmakers to know that we're not backing down. And what Mad Moms did was a group of mothers who lost their children to drunk driving. And now here we are. We're mad moms who have lost our children to something that we did not have education on, and we're not backing down.
Well, Stephanie Rowe, founder of Texas Against Fentanyl, Tucker's mother, thank you so much for sharing your story and being with us.
Thank you for having me.
From law enforcement to education and harm reduction, we are taking a closer look at the fight against this deadly drug. Our special presentation, Saving a Generation, the Fentanyl Crisis, airs next week. Check your local listings. It will air on some stations Monday at 7 p.m. Others will see it next Friday at 7 p.m. Texas voters approved a $1 billion plan to help meet the state's water needs, but some leaders say we need much more.
We estimate that the state of Texas will need to invest a minimum of $154 billion in the coming decades on our water supply needs.
We look at the new call for action to head off a growing water crisis. Lawmakers in Washington vote to avoid a government shutdown for now, the temporary fix, and the funding fight that's still looming on Capitol Hill. Texas is growing, and that's putting a strain on the state's water supply. Last year, Texas voters approved a proposition to create a fund to help finance projects to meet the growing demand for water. But some leaders are sounding the alarm and calling on the state to do more to avoid a water crisis. Our Ryan Chandler takes a closer look at the needs and the response.
Out here in Wimberley, Texas, this barren creek exemplifies the existential threat facing Texas. Ideally full and flowing, what is left of this creek bed has given way to its own plants, trying to survive on what little water they can find. The flood gauges and high water warnings, signs of the past. Wimberley creeks are bone dry. This area has been in drought for most of the last 2 years, implementing strict water limits and penalizing automatic sprinkler use. Out in West Texas, the problem is far worse.
Texas is out of water.
Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller is stressing this emergency.
We can't grow, we can't expand, we can't have economic opportunity and jobs without water. And we reached our limit. There is no more. So we've got to do some things different.
In Austin Tuesday, lawmakers consider how. The first need is conserving the water we already have. That means hard infrastructure upgrades. Leaky pipes waste more than 130 billion gallons of water every year, like this busted water line in Austin Monday. Another problem, fracking. Using clean water to frack wastes and pollutes. Companies are switching to brackish water instead.
We've got a lot to do. We just got to get busy and help ourselves.
Last year, voters approved the Texas Water Fund, setting aside $1 billion for projects across the state. But that's just a drop in the bucket.
Now, whatever policy path may be ahead of us, lawmakers caution that this is going to be very expensive, billions of dollars across decades of investment. But the question for the people of Wimberley and across the state is, what is the cost of doing nothing? In Wimberley, I'm Ryan Chandler.
Joining us now for Insight is Jeremy Mazer, the Director of Infrastructure and Natural Resources Policy for Texas 2036. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So lawmakers seem to talk about water every session. You testified at last week's House hearing on water policy. What's your main message and what needs to happen now?
We have two big water infrastructure challenges in the state. First, we need to expand our water supply portfolio for a drought-prone and growing state. The second challenge is that we have this growing problem associated with aging, deteriorating drinking water and wastewater systems that are fast becoming liabilities to the communities that they serve.
Texas voters approved the plan to put $1 billion toward water projects in the state. You say that's nowhere near enough. What are the critical needs and how much would it cost us to meet them?
At Texas 2036, we estimate that the state of Texas will need to invest a minimum of $154 billion in the coming decades on our water supply needs and fixing our aging, deteriorating systems. The $1 billion that lawmakers and state voters approved last session was a great first step. They took steps to expand our state's financial strategy for addressing our water infrastructure challenges, but the long-term price tag is $154 billion, and that $1 billion combined with other state and federal funding efforts aren't going to go far enough to what we need to do to fix the problem.
So the next session is just a few months away. What will Texas 2036 actually be working toward when lawmakers return to Austin?
We estimate that the state's long-term funding gap for water infrastructure, the amount of money we need to spend on developing water supplies and fixing our aging, deteriorating systems, is in excess of about $110 billion in the coming decades. We can close this gap, and we think the right solution is to follow the financial model that we already use for state parks and highways, which is to have a dedicated, focused revenue stream towards our Texas water funds that can be used to finance and build the water infrastructure and supplies that we need.
All right, Jeremy Mazer from Texas 2036, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Congress votes to avoid a government shutdown, but not everyone is happy.
What are we doing? I mean, it's absurd. We irresponsibly continue to spend money that we do not have.
The temporary fix and the funding fight looming on Capitol Hill. The federal government is no longer facing a shutdown threat. Congress passed a short-term funding bill to keep money flowing to government agencies through the election. But that temporary fix ends December 20th. And as Washington correspondent Hannah Brandt explains, that's setting up a holiday funding fight.
The American people can sleep easier, knowing we have avoided an unnecessary government shutdown.
Congress is celebrating after both the House and Senate passed a short-term funding bill known as a continuing resolution.
While continuing resolutions are never ideal, none of us like them, it's not a way to run a railroad, it allows Congress to continue serving the American people through the election.
House Republicans initially wanted to attach the SAVE Act to the funding bill, a measure that would require proof of citizenship to vote. But they were forced to take it out in order to reach a compromise that could pass.
It took much longer than it should have, but because House Republicans finally chose to work with us in the end, Congress is getting the job done.
The bill keeps most federal funding at its current levels and adds more money for the Secret Service and the upcoming presidential transition.
Nobody got everything they wanted, but we all thought, again, more money for the Secret Service, making sure there's enough money for transition, but let's leave everything else pretty much alone.
Not everyone is happy.
What are we doing? I mean, it's absurd. We irresponsibly continue to spend money that we do not have.
But the fight over what to cut and where to spend will continue as lawmakers now have more time to figure out a long-term budget.
Now we can get going in earnest on hammering out bipartisan full-year funding bills, including providing long overdue disaster assistance.
Right now, though, lawmakers are rushing back to their districts to hit the campaign trail with less than 6 weeks to go until Election Day. In Washington, I'm Hannah Brand.
You heard Texas Congressman Chip Roy express his unhappiness with the short-term spending bill. Before the vote, he gave some context to his opposition.
It was my considered judgment that we should move forward with a CR into next year with the SAVE Act and pick a fight on that and at a minimum try to push this all into next year rather than having it expire in December. I think it's a mistake to have this expire right before Christmas. It's for the appropriators, it's for the uniparty swamp, whatever pejorative you want to use, that's where they want it.
It's worth noting that Roy is the policy chair of the House Freedom Caucus, made up of some of the most conservative members in Congress. He played a key role in the process that pushed out former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.